Thank you everybody for actually coming to the last session of the day and coming to a database session for that matter. And for those of you who are here because your bosses made you, I apologize. Databases are not the most thrilling thing in the world for some people. For other people, it is their, end all and be all of everything that they do. And no, I happen to be a bit on both sides. Some days I hate them, some days I think they're my best friend. So today we are going to be looking at how we can manage our B2B data and our databases as best we can as publishers. So if you use a database and you didn't know you used it, is it really still a database? This is kind of like the tree fell in the forest, nobody's there to hear it. Did it really fall? Well, the truth is we all use databases every single day in our day-to-day life. They are very common in everything that we do on a regular basis, especially online. So if you've checked your email today, if you pulled up your contacts on your phone, if you searched anything in Google, which I do all the time, check the weather on the weather network, use the Tim's card to buy a coffee or a donut, which I do constantly, use your ATM machine, booked a hotel or a flight somewhere. If you received healthcare, the first thing they ask for is your OHIP card, which gets swiped, that's accessing a database. If you've shopped online, if you've used a credit card, checked any sports scores, looked at your Facebook or LinkedIn feeds, played any games online, and the list goes on and on and on. And all of these items in the back end or somewhere within their functionality actually have a database that they use or access to retrieve information and bring information back based on what you're trying to do. So as a little bit of a timeline on databases, and just to mention this can be as interactive as you guys want. If you have any questions along the way, stop me at any point in time, ask away, and we'll do our best to get any questions answered. So a computerized database first came around on the scene in the 1960s. This was the first time that they had actually large random computers that would collect and store information in a very specific way. But they were big, they were clunky, very, very slow time in processing, a lot of power needed to run very simplistic sort of applications. So they weren't very widely used. They were basically in NASA and maybe the weather network. By the 70s, relational databases came on the scene. This helped us to really start to categorize things a lot better. It helped with a lot of the functionality and the usage of the data that's being stored. Then by the 80s, many magazine publishers were actually starting to use their own databases. So they were mostly larger publishers, like back then the Plain Hunters of the world, and a lot of the US publishers were starting to keep their readership and the directory listings, which were a big deal way back in the day, on databases in-house or with a commissioned third party. It's also in the 80s that SQL, structured query language, first came on the scene. And that was a big deal because that actually helped with the functionality of databases to a very large degree. And it led way to a lot of the new developments in databases. So by the 90s, that's when we started to see a lot more usability of databases. Some smaller databases came on the scene. There was DBase, DBase 3, DBase 4, Fox Pro, and then ultimately Microsoft Access, which are much more common databases for small enterprise companies and for personal users to be able to work with data and to manage databases. Obviously, some applications are still required by some companies to do much more higher functionality, more robust applications. So Oracle, SQL, DB2 are still around to a large degree and large capacity. So what this has done as far as the timeline is concerned, it's brought us to a place where we can now collect and gather our data in an efficient and affordable way. We can manage and store our data, and we can analyze and report on our data in an affordable and efficient way. So, because of all of this, today all of you are sitting here and you all have your own database or your own databases, depending on what the situation is. And as a result, you might be feeling a little bit like this guy. So, we have good moments and we're happy and everything's going well, and then something happens and we are not happy at all. Or it may even be worse. You may be feeling a little bit more like this guy. And I apologize for the graphic nature of this, but we feel like we got hit by a train sometimes. So, and I love the little baby's expression every time he gets hit by the train. So, a lot of times we're, for purpose of a better term, okay, we'll switch to the next slide and stop that. A lot of times for the purpose of the better term, we feel somewhat saddled with our databases. A lot of us didn't actually go to database school or intend to be in the area that we're in, but we find ourselves, whether it's our primary responsibility or a secondary responsibility, having to manage a database and needing to be able to capture as much data and make as much use of our data as we can. And the reason that we're feeling like that little baby and that little guy standing in front of the train is because there's just so much data now. Long gone are the days when we used to have a simple database where we would have name, company, address, some demographics, and you're done. You might flag them as having received an issue here and there, but that was the extent of it. We are dealing with multitudes of data on a grand scale now. And this data is coming at us sometimes unstructured, sometimes unusable, but we want to get at it, so we're trying to find creative ways to be able to use some of this data. And it's just coming at us at such volumes, and it's very taxing sometimes to be able to corral it and make sense of it all. So today, what we're going to kind of go through is we're going to be looking at evaluating your data needs and the requirements that you have currently, how to better manage your data to allow deep, meaningful analysis, how data can help generate revenue for sales teams using data models and a few other tidbits there, how data can help your editorial teams by analyzing and correlating engagement along with your database and trying to make the most use out of the data that you have. And finally, and there's that four-letter word again, CASL, how to keep your email data compliant to CASL, which is a big factor, especially with the transitionary period ending come July 2017. So the first one is evaluating your data and your database requirements. So here's our fella, Gilbert, I think is his name. And if you read through this, it says, you know, his boss comes up to it and says, I think we should build an SQL database. He thinks in his mind, uh-oh, does he understand what he said, or is it something he saw in a trade magazine ad? So he turns to him and says, well, what color do you want that database? And he says, I think Mo has the most RAM. Well, don't do that. That is not how to go about determining A, whether you need a database, and B, what you're going to do with that database. You have to do it right, you have to be informed, and you should always have a plan. Yes, Scott?
I have a question. Is that a shot at your boss?
By the way, anybody doesn't know, Scott is my boss. At least was up until this moment. So thank you, Scott, for keeping your promise and staying silent back there. So it doesn't matter if you're creating a brand new database or if you have an existing database with existing data, you do need to be able to know the basics of your data and your data needs. What it is that I'm collecting, how am I collecting it, how am I going to use it, and what is this actually going to provide to me and my organization. So it's important that you do everything that you need to fully understand that the data that you have on hand. Often, it's good to enlist project managers or business analysts, especially on the beginning part of this, to be able to gain their help in trying to do the assessments and all the requirements that are involved. If you don't have availability to those kind of people, make sure at the very least you use the people that are closest to the data, the people that understand the data as much as possible. They're the ones that can steer you in the right direction usually, and they're the ones that can help avoid pitfalls because they are familiar with it and know what to do with certain elements of data and what not to do potentially. So the first thing is you do need to take an inventory of your data. So look at what your company is collecting currently. Is it readership lists? Is it email lists? Is it e-newsletter data? Is it CRM and advertiser data? Is it event registrants? Are you overlaying Stats Canada or other environics? I always have a hard time saying that word. Environics data, and any other data set that you might be getting from any other area. So always, take the inventory, take a look at your data sources, look at the data and determine, do you have enough information in there for what you're trying to achieve at the end of all of this? So there's no sense in building a database, taking some data, putting it in there, and in the end just to see you've got these huge gaps in your data and it's not going to give you the information that you need at the end of the day. So take a good look at the data that you're keeping on hand and how it's going to be purposeful for you as a company. Once you've inventoried your data, other factors that you're going to want to consider, other questions that you're going to want to ask yourself is, how many data sources do I have? Do I have 3 data sources or do I have 300 data sources all coming out from other areas? What is the size of each data set? How much information am I going to have to manage and maintain? Is the data that I receive from these sources, is it structured? Is it usable? Can I actually do something with this data? Do I have enough information in all the different data sets to be able to identify like records and build a master record or to correlate information so that I can actually gain some insights out of this? Or is this data, components of it perhaps not useful because there's nothing we can do to link to other data sets? How many records ultimately is my database going to have? And how many fields is it going to have? Not just, I'm going to have 10,000 records, but perhaps there's going to be 500 fields across those 10,000 records. And what are the types of fields that my database is going to have? If it's all just text, it's name and title and company and address information, that's going to require a certain size and it's going to require a certain build for the database. If you're collecting images, graphics, if you're bringing your engagement and your articles and everything else into this, you might need a much larger database to be able to accommodate it. Then you're going to have to start to ask, okay, who's going to build this database? Now that I know I have all this data, I know it's going to work for me, I know it's probably going to give me what I want at the end of the day, who's going to actually build it? And are we going to build just a database, or are we going to actually build functionality to this database? Is it actually going to serve a purpose in our organization, like a readership database or an email marketing database? And then what functionality do I want? At the end of the day, what am I expecting to get out of this database? So once you feel you've answered at least some of those questions, you're feeling comfortable to move forward, then you need to start looking at other factors like, am I going to consolidate all my data into one highly functional application? Or am I going to have my different databases that I'm going to then bring up and roll the information up into a data warehouse for reporting or analysis or other purposes? Based on my data sets and the general database size, what platform am I going to use? So if you've got 3,000 records that you want to bring in, you're probably okay using a Microsoft Access database or a third-party application that might be able to handle it. If you've got 3 million records and a high level of functionality requirements, well, you're probably going to want to look at an Oracle database or something else that can actually do that, or where you have multiple user input. You have to start asking yourself also, do we want to outsource this or contract this? Do we have the in-house requirements to be able to build the database ourselves, build the functionality and everything that we need? Or are we going to commission somebody on a contract basis, give them the specs, but then if you're going to do that, are they building just a database, or are they building a database and the functionality? And who's your subject matter expert going to be? Who's the person in your organization going to be that's feeding the specs and the business requirements and everything that's needed in order for this contract person to build that database for you? Do you go out and look for a third-party application already off the shelf? Does one exist? Depending on what your needs are, you may find that there's a third-party application that's already out there and it may do 90% of what your requirements are. Or you may look everywhere high and low and come up short and realize that there's absolutely nothing out in the marketplace currently that we can just buy off the shelf that's going to give us what we want. Or do you partner with a fulfillment company? There's a number of fulfillment companies available, both here in Canada and in the US. And they have the expertise and they have the background and the knowledge to help you with all your data requirements, your database requirements, and your day-to-day functionality with those databases and with your data. And if you're going to partner with a company, well, to what level? You just want to access their system and do all the work yourself. So you're doing all your own data entry, you're doing all your own customer service, you're doing all your own circulation management and other requirements. Or do you want to hand that over to them? Or do you want to hand portions of that over to them? Regardless of what you decide you want to do, you have to look at all the options. You have to do the cost analysis, and you have to see what is going to be the most affordable and give you the most value for the money that you're going to spend. And when you're doing that analysis, keep in mind that there's a difference between the flexibility and the costs depending on which way you want to go. If you want to build your own in-house system, it's going to take you a lot longer. It's probably going to cost you a lot more, at least initially. But the customization of that in-house application is probably going to meet your business requirements 99%, 100% of the time. If you go with a service company, then you're probably going to get 80% of your requirements met right out the door. You do your conversion, you get all the functionality that they've already pre-built, but there's going to be 20% that you're either going to have to live without, or you're going to have to then commission them to customize it for you. But do the analysis, look at all the options, and then make your determination once you're actually informed. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how to better manage your data to allow deep, meaningful analysis, because everybody wants meaningful stuff nowadays. So first thing is you have to view your database as a product. Oh, and look, we've got a random database joke here, which isn't random because I selectively inserted it right into the slide. But the joke is, I'm sure everybody's going to bust the gut, an SQL query walks into a bar. In one corner of the bar are 2 tables. The query walks up to the tables and asks, mind if I join you? See, only a handful of people got that, because a SQL query is what's used to join the table. I told you, Martin, you're the only guy that's going to end up dead. That's a sad state of affairs right there. It actually is quite funny if you know what the heck that was. Okay, so back to viewing your database as a product. Far too often we see our database as an ancillary product to our core products. It is a requirement of serving our issues, it's a requirement of serving our newsletters, it's a requirement of doing our marketing. But the truth is, if you were to spend the time and the effort, you can actually monetize your database as a database. And you can use it to help other departments with the information and the trending analysis and the data that you actually have on hand. So if you start seeing your database as a product unto itself, and not by a byproduct of the core business, and you treat your database as a potential revenue stream, and you give it the attention and the sales backing, and that's another area, is having the sales force actually using their expertise out in the industry and the marketplace and offering all of these other products now that you have available through the database, you're going to have a much more successful approach. And in my mind, there are three main keys to successful data. And those keys are data consolidation, data governance, and data standardization. And I'll go into each one of those a little bit, but ultimately what all of these things help you to do is, have you ever heard of the phrase comparing apples to oranges? Well, if you're not doing this, especially standardization, you're comparing apples to pineapples and strawberries and tomatoes and bananas and even this little radish here. So in order to avoid that, we want to compare apples to apples anytime, anywhere, and all the time. So to get there, you need to do those three keys that I mentioned. The first one is consolidation, data consolidation. This is not an easy task. With all the data that we were talking about before coming at us from all these different areas, be able to bring all the data into one central application with one central database that's fundamentally underneath that application is extremely difficult, especially depending on where you're starting from. There's a lot of work and a lot of manual work and a lot of rigmarole that goes into consolidating your data into one master record. So consolidation, though, does go a long way in helping you to get the information, the critical information, and the useful information that you can use to better manage your data and better manage your customers and to have a much more usability out of your database. The use of a master record database, again, that's where you have one database, one application, and all of your other functionality feeds from that. It's like a readership application or any other application that you might have. So that's where all of your magazine information, your email data, your event registrants, your engagement data, all your CASL consent information, all the preferences that people have provided are all coming into one single record in a single database. The management gets much easier once you have that, but the entry point for getting that is very difficult sometimes. Yes?
So when you put yours together, the slide before was talking about whether you buy one off the shelf or whether you create it or outsource it. What did you do?
I've done, in my past, I've done all of the above.
Which one do you like best?
It really depends. I love the very specificness of building your own. I don't necessarily love the fact that you can build your own and then that key programmer or that key database architect has found another job somewhere else paying more and you're left in the lurch. I also don't like the fact that the onus is then on me and my staff to really be very knowledgeable and be very explicit in what we want and what we need. It's very costly, it's
Right.
more expensive, but it's definitely beneficial. It has a lot of benefits. The option of using a third party, using a fulfillment company, if you find the right fit for you, it can be often your best sort of resort as far as getting a lot of that functionality, and depending on how much expertise you have in-house. You may not have the expertise in-house, you may need
Right.
a third-party service bureau to help you with that expertise, and they can really help bring you a lot further as a result than you would have been able to do yourself. When you're with a fulfillment company, there's other clients there. So you have other like businesses that are also looking for things to create and looking for their new path going forward. So it's a consolidated effort across an industry more often, whereas when you're doing it in-house on your own, you make that decision, you do it. If you were wrong, you're going to suffer the consequences. If you were right, you're going to gain the benefits. So yes.
I don't know if it's a good time to ask a key question, but for me, you were talking about how you link the data. So when you're creating a master record, you're getting different data sources.
Yes.
It's B2B data,
Mm-hmm.
and you know the match rates can be very different
Yep,
for
absolutely.
IBM or International Business Machine.
Absolutely.
What do you use for a link? Do you
We
use
use
numeric
thresholds.
systems?
No, we kind of build our own. We use what we call match codes, and we have a litany of different parameters in match codes. So you can take a match code that is full postal code and first name, last name, and full address, or you can take something that's basically the first 3 characters of the postal code plus the first 5 characters of the last name, plus the first name. You can use phonetics. A lot of applications will use phonetics. I don't find the phonetics actually reliable. I do like the harder match. But you build a threshold. You try and determine, okay, this match code brings me back 80% of the correct matches. And then the ones that I'm not sure of, you kind of error out and you have to have a person
The reason I
look
asked,
at
I
it.
used to work at Dun & Bradstreet,
Yeah.
and used to help a lot of the audit bureaus,
Mhm.
right? Making sure, for controlled circulations, the SICs, those are correct, whatever.
Right, yeah.
But we got them to use a numbering system, and we got
Mhm.
100% match rate on numbers. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what you're suggesting? That's why
Yeah,
the
ultimately what you do
alphanumeric
is
and numeric.
once, because initially you don't have that numbering system, right? You just
right.
have all this data and you've got, Betty Smith here and Betty Smith there, this postal code there, that postal code there. You do that 80% match rate and you try and determine, okay, I've got 80% of my data matched now. Once you do that, you assign that person their own unique ID.
Good.
And then you use that unique ID and it's constant after that.
Okay.
And we have multiple IDs. We have company IDs that assign companies and people and the subscriptions and everything else. And now the email address itself is more and more becoming a unique key on most databases, which is great, except for the fact that not all of our data has an email address, so you still need the other one as well. But if you can't get to that master record, you're certainly going to be better off down the road.
Thank you.
If it's not possible, then do the data warehouse thing. So if you can't keep it on a master record in the master database, roll it all up to a data warehouse, do your merge purges and everything else that you need there, and then have that, at least that one single view of your customer bases. This is going to allow you to really see some real value and true engagement from your readers and or your advertisers as well. The second thing is data governance. Most people don't know what data governance means, they've heard of it, but basically what data governance is it refers to overall management and of the availability, the usability, the integrity, and the security of the data within your organization. So every organization, whether they refer to it as data governance or not, will have some form of data governance in place. It's basically saying, this is where we store our data, it's encrypted here, we have a server, it's behind a locked door, nobody can come in and just, fry the server if they've had a bad day or something like that. So governance involves the processes and the procedures concerning how the data is to be stored, how it's archived, how it's backed up, and protected from mishap, theft, or attack. So it's having the security measures in place. So it's, in most cases, it's common sense. If you don't have to divulge credit card information all across your organization, don't do it. Now, actually, none of us should be seeing any credit card information. Everything is encrypted. Most of us use gateways for payment processing. We who are receiving the payment don't even get the credit card information. It goes directly through. So, but a lot of us still have legacy systems, and in some areas of our applications, there might be some credit card numbers, and somebody printed off a report and they left it in the mail room, and now everybody can see these credit card numbers. So the governance is making sure that you're not breaching privacy issues with the information that you have, that you're not leaving yourself open to anybody who wants to perpetrate any kind of crime with your data. Yes?
The PIPEDA
yeah.
legislation, I think they're kind of watching data breaches, right? Is that what
They
you're
are,
saying?
yes. And the governance would definitely fall heavily under PIPEDA, especially on a consumer level. PIPEDA is heavily consumer. It's sensitive information about, birth dates, age, income, that kind of stuff. B2B, we're mostly capturing company-specific information. It's still back and forth a lot as far as the email address is concerned. Is that considered private information, personal information, even on a business email address? So we do have to be aware of it, but even then, once you start collecting credit card numbers, payment information, or anything else like that, it becomes sensitive material. So you have to make sure that the data governance is in place one way or another. The last one, and in my opinion, the most strenuous one, and the one that can really bring you the most yield, is data standardization. Especially if you're a multi-product publisher. If you have more than one magazine, or you have more than one brand, or more than one property, and it's collecting similar information but in different ways, this is where you can go into the back end of your applications, create links, create translation tables, and standardize that data to mean one thing, and actually be able to get some awareness of who your readers are and be able to collectively analyze them and to select them based on the standardization. So do what you can to normalize your data and all sources of data so that the same code means the same thing. So if you take an industry code, for example, we have a number of magazines, and a number of them are in similar but different industries. Some publishers and some industries have a specific need to call, when we send out a subscription form or ask somebody to identify what industry they're in, they want it to say it in a very specific way. The other publication wants to say it in its own very specific way. But the reality is they're both the same thing. They're both, metal forging and stamping codes. This guy just wants to leave the metal out. This guy wants to call it forging and stamping. Well, if we go to run a query without the standardization, we'd have to look for every one of those anomalies and put that into a query so that we can get all of those people that mean the same thing out at once. If you standardize the data, we use North American Industry Classification Codes. So any business type that is relayed to me by a subscriber on a form or on the website automatically gets converted to what their North American Industry Classification Code should be. So at the end of the day, if I want to go and I want to select all manufacturing titles, I just have to say NAICS code equals 3 anything. And I will, no matter what they said on their forms, no matter what the magazine specifically collects, I'm going to get everybody. So that's data standardization. You should do that on every code type of thing you have, right down to your province codes. Don't have ONT for some and then ON for others and the full word for others. So then when you go to query that, you're going to have to use every instance of that. So normalize your data as much as possible and standardize your data, especially coding across the board as much as you possibly can. This is going to make your reporting a lot easier, and it's going to make the yield on the number of names that you want at any given time much better. Yes?
I was going to say, Quebec cities are quite long too. So
yes. Yes, and either have an accent or don't have an accent in there, but just keep it the same way. Okay, so now we're going to move on to how data can help generate revenue for sales teams using data models. Yay, sales. Any salespeople in the room right now? Oh, okay. Well, I'll help 3 people. But it's a good takeaway for anybody that's working with their data to be able to go back to their sales team and say, hey, have you ever thought of this? Is this something that'd be worthwhile or something that might be beneficial to you? So the concept of helping your organization make money, usually in circulation and in databases and IT and everywhere else, we are a cost center to them. We're not a revenue generator. And I'm making it my life's mission that before I die, my department will actually make money at some point. So that's why I want all those database files coming back to me, all that revenue. But basically the concept here is using a data model in order to help your publishers to gain prospects of like people that are already their advertisers. So it's where you go out and you get your publishers' CRM data or you get their advertiser data. And they say, here's the 500 people that advertised with me over the last 5 years or whatever. And it's CRM data, so it's not exactly top-notch data. It's coming to you, it's missing addresses, it's missing telephone numbers, there's companies in the name field and their post codes in the company field. So you gotta clean it up a little, massage it. But there's really not much more in there other than that that's useful. But if you take the data and you scrub it against your entire database, chances are you're gonna find some matches using those match codes that we talked about earlier. And you're gonna be able to say, okay, now that I've got 300 of those 500 names on my database, I have a NAICS code now. I know what industry all these people are in. I have a job title now. I have emails that I can supply back and everything else like that. So the concept is to use that, create that data model, and then that's telling you who that's the criteria for the advertising base for that magazine. You can then take that criteria and you can see who else on your database also has that criteria, fits the model, or you can even go to a provider like a Dun & Brad or an Info Canada, and you can get more of the same kind of names and provide them to your salespeople as new leads that they can do. We actually did this, I think it was 3 years ago now. We were a business information group at the time. We had a lot of manufacturing titles and a lot of other ancillary titles as well. And we called it Lead Smart. We actually gave it a name and created a product out of this whole process. And Lead Smart was basically this 3-step approach. And we actually offered this to some of our advertisers. We had a couple want to do it with their own client base. So it's where you take, again, the advertiser file, you merge purge it, and you get a match rate. Second step is you provide the analytics on what that match rate was, how many of these counts can be appended back to the CRM, and what we can do to build that data model, and then ultimately provide more people to the sales teams of who those people are. So in this example, and this is a real example at the time, we had a file handed to us of 10,735 records of former advertisers for this one brand that we had. And it wasn't even a publishing brand, actually. And out of those 10,735, we matched 3,952 to our database. And what that meant was I had now 3,917 industry codes that can be applied back to their CRM. So when they're looking a company up, they can say, oh, I see that you're a widget manufacturer, so they'll have a bit more information on hand. Employee size codes, we had 2,695, so they could see, was there only 5 employees at this company, or was it 500? How big is this company that I'm trying to reach right now? The sales volume in the same way. How big is this company? There was 1,774 emails that were missing off that 3,952 that we matched. So we were able to provide email back to the salespeople as well as job title functions, and even physical addresses. Like I said, a lot of this data comes to us and it's missing a lot of components. So there was 447 addresses they didn't have on file that they now have. So that's the very first kind of approach. So you're already giving them more depth to their data and more information when they're making these calls. Now that you have these NAICS codes appended, you have the sales volume appended, you have the job titles appended, now you can build that data model. So out of those 3,952, we looked at the information that we had on hand, which was industry, title, employee size, and annual sales ranges, and we said, okay, for this product, this customer database, who are our top rankers? And by looking at this data, we could see that most of their advertisers are in the engineering services or in the environmental consulting services, some offices of lawyers. We can see that the people that are taking the ads are environmental consultants and remediation professionals. And we can see that most of them are between, small to medium range companies. So that's the data model that you can build on any one of your advertiser bases. And then use that data model of NAICS code equals this, titles equals that, company employee size equals this, sales volumes equals that. And you can go out and you can find on your own data, how many more people do I have that fit this profile? Or go out and buy more data and give them more leads. When we did this, we launched it across a number of products and publications. And the first month that we did it, because we actually took it another step forward and said, with CASL in place and everything else too, we don't want you emailing these people, so we're not going to provide you that information, but we'll do it for you because we know we have consent and all the requirements to do that. And we sent out, hey, in the next issue of Widget Magazine is, a special blue widget edition, and you should be in there. And we actually got, in that month, at least 5 new advertisers, brand new advertisers to our company that these publishers never even heard of before. They were just the right ones. So again, you're not going to bring in, $5 million to the company on the first try, but if you continue to promote this and continue to provide those leads, hopefully some sales will actually come out of it. And we actually had some publishers coming back and thanking us and emailing us saying that, they just got a call for a sale out of nowhere because they got this piece. So it did prove to be somewhat worthwhile. So a few other things you can do to help them make money is most of us use our database and we do list rentals, whether they're e-blast marketing list rentals or whether they're physical list rentals anymore. Often that comes through a broker like Cornerstone or something like that, or it comes directly to someone in the database community to fulfill those jobs. Well, provide those leads to the salespeople. So if you had a company that showed up and said, hey, I'm really interested in reaching all consulting engineers, and you pull the lead blast for them, and you have a consulting engineering magazine, well, the chances are that publisher is going to want to talk to that company and see if they can get them in for a full-page ad or other advertising that they can bring them in for. So always provide those leads wherever you can to your sales teams. Analyze the data for any new products and special issues or supplements that might be available, just based on the data. It's a starting point. So, people don't know what to ask for if they don't know it's there. So there is a way to be able to analyze the data and provide that information back out to management teams or publishers to see if there's anything in there that they think they can actually start a new product on or do a supplement for. And then obviously provide your sales team with useful and relevant reports. And this is that potential, new products thing. So we actually went, again, this was a few years back, but we went across our entire database and we basically just did some horizontal pulls. We pulled based on industry and specialized sectors where we knew we didn't have a magazine in currently, or it was on a fringe of a magazine. And then we went from there to looking at horizontally across titles. Are there certain types of people that we want? Do we want to do IT professionals? Do we want to do HR professionals? Do we have enough names? If we want to launch a newsletter specific to HR professionals, do we have enough names to sustain something like that? And by pulling these reports, it opens the conversation. We actually launched a couple of titles this way. That's how one of our newsletters is called Clean Technology, and it goes to the industrial and manufacturing sector, but it's based on that clean technology aspect, and we had enough names to start a newsletter that would be able to do that. And it just at least starts the conversation, and people can start looking at it and saying, hey, I had no idea that I had this many firefighters on file. You know, we actually can do a firefighting magazine, or I can do a supplement to a newsletter because I run an EMS magazine and I want to make it exclusive to firefighters. So providing that kind of information is just a gateway, but the fact that you can provide it is pretty cool into itself. And then doing the reporting, the relevant reporting. There's a number of ways to do reporting. It can be brand specific. It can be very specific to a niche within a market. Or if you have a database and you have the ability, you can start to doing roll-up reports and show some real reach across entire sectors. So in this instance, at the time, we had a bunch of these manufacturing titles, but we didn't have anything that brought all this together. And if somebody said, I just want to reach everyone that I can in your manufacturing sector. Well, this report is very similar to an AAM or a BPA brand report. And it tells you, okay, here are the 17 titles that we have that are in manufacturing. And then it goes on to show you, okay, here's the circulation for each, here's the newsletter traffic for each, the website traffic for each, here's the newsletter reach for each, and then it gives you a total reach number. And it helps sell that product with the vastness of your data, not just the readership perhaps, but also every other element for the newsletters and everything else. So having that information available to your sales teams is always going to be helpful for them to be able to, hopefully impress the client. So the next thing we'll talk about is how data can help your editorial teams by analyzing and correlating engagement. Oh, another random database humor joke. And actually, there was only one database joke in existence. And that was the first one that we saw, which was such a big hit. And there are no others. The rest, even I wouldn't laugh at. So I wasn't going to bring them in. So, helping your editorial teams. First of all, use your data to access readership for editorial insights. We do an annual readership survey. And in that readership survey, we ask very specific things of our readers to tell us about how they feel about the magazine, how they feel about the size, and obviously how they feel about the content, which is, a very important part of the publication. And they will come back and they will tell you. Usually people who are responding to surveys like this are either people that hate you or that love you. And the people that love you are the people that are really reading your magazine. They'll know the columnists by name. They'll be able to cite who they like and who they don't like and what the reasons are for each of them. So we do an annual readership survey and we collect this information. We ask very specifically, and this was a general question about what do you like about the publication's overall quality. And you'll see even in some of these responses, they'll talk about the editorial and what they like, the columnists that they don't like, the editor that they like or don't like. But then you ask very specifically, how would you rate the content of the editorial of the magazine? And you can see for this publication it came back, some were excellent, most were very good, and some were good, but there were a few that were fair and needs improvement. And then you open that up and say, okay, can you tell us what you like or dislike about the publication's writing and editorial? And they'll come back and they'll tell you everything that's on their mind, whether you want to hear it or not. And yes, most often this is negative stuff where they tell you, but if you start to see a trend, if you're seeing that they're all kind of coming back saying the same thing, whether that's about the size of the magazine, or whether that's about a certain author in the magazine, then you're going to start to see a trend, and you can actually start to look at information from that perspective. And I think comment number 3 there, we're asking the guy about editorial and writing. He came back talking about the show that he attended that this publication puts on, saying how, well, we don't have time in our industry to go to these shows through the week. You should be doing it on weeknights or on the weekends where you can get more attendance. But all very relevant information. And then this information should always be sent back to your editorial team so that they can review it and go through it and make whatever decisions that they need to make based on the information that they're getting. So the other thing with editorial is share any data points that you have with your editorial teams. If you're running a survey, an industry benchmark on behalf of a client, on behalf of anybody else, share that information with your editorial team. They're often looking for that kind of information to be able to substantiate some kind of editorial content that they're working on, or it can help them to come up with content based on what you're gleaning from some of these stats. Some of these stats are directly from the reader, where we go out and we poll them. Some of them are from Stats Canada sources. In some cases, people are using Stats Canada stuff to overlay onto their readership. And once you do that analysis, again, give that information over to your editors so that they can actually use it and find some help in their content. use the readership data to help editors gather industry statistics for editorial purposes. So if there's something going on in a certain industry and there's two versions of an application, let's say, and there's a big sort of controversy about which one's better, and you know, it's hot in the market right now because everybody's talking about A versus B, and perhaps your editor wants to write a story on that, and they want to comment on what their readership, you know, feels is better, which one is the better one and why. Have them do a survey with you. Poll your readership. Your readership is there, it's available, and have them go out very specifically. And when you go out with a very short survey like that, it's amazing how many people actually will respond nicely and easily to it. We actually did that years ago with our digital editions. When digital editions first came out, we were using a proprietary digital edition provider, and there was a lot of controversy internally in our company at the time. This was like 7 years ago, saying that you know, this other new one was much better than the one we've been using, and half of the people felt one way, half of the people felt the other way. And I said, well, we're not going to decide this, let the readership decide. And we sent it out, and it was like 90% was the new way. Only 10% wanted the old way. There was just no questioning that after that. So again, it's using your data to really help you make some real business decisions. The other thing for editorial is think about using, and this might be a bit of a tomorrow thing, but think about using your engagement data in correlation with your readership data. So right now, most of us are having newsletters that are going out on a regular basis, and the editors often will go into some reporting structure where they can see, okay, this newsletter, I had 232 opens on this one, I had 75 clicks. My second article only had 113 opens with 20 clicks. And last week, my newsletter had 563 opens, and they're doing their own little analysis and saying, you know, which kind of content is drawing more people. But if you could take it a step further, and if you could bring that engagement right back to your reader, so you know who opened what, and who clicked on what, and what is the type of content that that type of person is actually consuming. So if you're looking at the specific types of editorial content that your readers are consuming, and you produce analytics that can give insights on what your readers like, then you can provide that analysis back to the editors. So if you can say, you know, this is a sample of my record, my email address, and this is a screen that we had that we're rebuilding in a new application right now eventually, but what this does is it tells me, there's a pointer on here somewhere, yay, okay, this email address received these newsletters, and it'll go on and on and on and on. And these newsletters were sent out on, you know, these dates, and this is the name of the newsletter, and this is how many times that's the more, annex new time, opened that newsletter, and if I clicked on it. And it'll also tell me specifically the emails that I opened and what date they were opened on, and then it'll tell me if I clicked on it, what is it that I clicked on? And this is all to my readership database. So I can say, that's the more, open these newsletters, and she opens an average, you know, 13 times a month of our newsletters, and that this is the content that she brought in. But I can also now tell you that Vesna Moore is the vice president of, you know, ABC Manufacturing Company, and ABC Manufacturing Company is a widget manufacturer. And you can start to cross-reference this data now, and you can start to see little pockets of, you know, operational people at a plant maybe always tend to read technical articles, technical content, and you can then start to tailor certain segments of your audience to receive certain types of content and hopefully get better engagement, higher open rates, and everything that goes with it. So the dream is that when you use this information, you know, you're trying to read the mind of your reader, but this is Bill, he's saying, hi, I'm Bill. I want you to send me content only on Wednesdays, only about legislation, and maybe some profile pieces, because that's all I seem to ever read. Doesn't matter what you send me. So knowing that, we can tailor our stuff directly to Bill. But also, there's a whole bunch of other people that are just like Bill, and that's where you build those pockets. And you can start, you know, looking at any supplemental newsletters that you want to send, or supplemental areas of the magazine that you might want, based on the content that's being consumed by the individuals, knowing who they are and knowing what industry they're in, and any other information you may have on your readership database with them. So we're down to our last section here, and that is how to keep your email data compliant to CASL. Everybody in here knows what CASL is, I assume. And we've all been struggling with it and cursing it and everything else that goes with it. So the one thing to mention about CASL is that CASL came in effect July 1st, 2014. So if you haven't been compliant since then, you haven't been compliant to date. Prior to CASL, our anti-spam legislation was governed under PIPEDA, which is the Privacy Act. It was very much like my little kitten there. His name is Quinn, by the way, and he's about 3 years old now. But it didn't have any teeth. There wasn't really a lot of enforcement, and there wasn't even a lot of rules and regulations around anti-spam specifically. So when CASL came in, it came in with a lot of teeth. And it made a huge difference on the landscape for any kind of email marketer and how we could do our email marketing. So the big deal with CASL is the fines that are related to it. And these are fines directly from the CRTC, who is the governing body of CASL. But basically, if you're caught in violation of CASL, a company can be charged $10 million per violation. So that's, you sent an e-blast out, and not only did you not have consent, but you also didn't have a working unsubscribable. That's 2 violations. So you're now $20 million just on that one time you sent that bad email. So never do that. But it's also on the individual level. Anyone who has a director role or up can be charged personally that $1 million per violation. So in that same scenario with the 2 violations, that would be $2 million to Scott if we ever went against CASL regulations. So I'm sure he's good for it. I'm sure he's good for it. You'll do fine in prison. It's okay.
I'm sure I will.
Now, there have been some real charges levied. The last one, actually, which I don't even have on the slide, was the very first charge to an individual. And that was for $15,000. He had 10 violations, so they could have charged him $10 million. But the new person in charge of CASL is coming out to be quite lenient, and they've said their intent is not to bankrupt companies. Their intent is to get people to be within compliance. So they lowered that $10 million down to $15,000 because it was an individual, and there was, and they were willing to work with them on becoming compliant. But it is very real. The other important thing to mention with CASL is that come July 2017, July 1st, 2017, is the end of the transitionary period. And I'm not sure if everybody understands what that means, but when CASL came into effect, they tried to give us some leeway on being able to continue to send to the email databases that we had. And they said, okay, we'll give you 3 years to try and get consent on the emails that you have. So for 3 years until July 30th, 2017, we're going to allow you to go with the emails that you have in file as long as you're honoring their unsubscribes and everything else like that. So anybody that you have on file that you're still emailing today, that either you don't know what the date of acquisition was of that email, or you don't know the type of consent, or you know it was implied consent, but it was implied consent from 1987, from when they last talked to you, they've got to come off. Because they're going to be looking at this and scrutinizing this. It is the last sort of passage to that. The other big thing come July 1st, 2017 is a private right to action. Basically what that means is there's lawyers that are leaving their firms currently to start up new law firms specifically to be able to sue companies based on CASL breaches private right of action. What that means is class action lawsuits. They're going to be out there and they're going to be looking for people who have been, horribly harmed by the sending of these spam emails into their inboxes, and the infraction from the CRTC is $200 per email that they received. If they prove you didn't have consent or tried to unsubscribe and it couldn't, and you've sent them 100 emails since then, that's $20,000 that you're going to owe that one person, just that one person. So the class actions are a real concern, especially for large email marketers. So making sure that you're within compliance is that much more important, especially come July 1st, 2017. And then we start to talk about, okay, how do we become compliant or stay in compliance? And before you get anywhere, you have to ask some of the basic questions. And that's, first of all, who's going to champion this? You have to have someone in your organization that is going to be at least somewhat responsible. Not to say that they're on the hook fully for CASL, but they're the champion. They're the person that's going to go out, try and understand the legislation, meet with legal counsel if required, and determine what your business practices are going to be as far as CASL is concerned. Who's going to be responsible for compliance? What departments? What individuals? Who is going to be the person that we go to when we have a compliance question? What departments or individuals need to be involved? Do you have to get your IT people involved, get some programming done? Do you need to get your sales force in? Do you need to talk to your circuit people, make sure they're the only ones that are getting their hands onto the emails and everything, and not passing that around? Where do we start? And do we need legal counsel? And if you haven't seek legal counsel, and if you do any real email volumes, and if you're not feeling comfortable with where you sit with CASL today, I suggest you do seek some legal counsel. Be a little careful of the legal counsel, because lawyers are lawyers, and they look at the law, and they will say, well, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you find a lawyer that understands perhaps publishing business a little bit, they might be able to see their way through saying, well, yeah, you can do that, but you have to do it this way, as opposed to just a blanket no. Because we certainly don't want to jeopardize that component of our business at all. So once you've done that, then what you need to do is you need to inventory all of your emails and the types of communications that you send as far as commercial electronic messages. Get it on paper. Have a matrix, a big spreadsheet, a crosshatch spreadsheet, whatever it takes, but list every single type of email that you send, how you send it, whether you have consent on that or not, where that consent came from, and do that inventory so that you understand where your compliance concerns might be as far as the types of emails that you have on file currently. Determine where you have existing consent and how it relates to CASL requirements. Did I have existing consent but it's already expired? Am I removing my expires on a regular basis? Assess the sources of the email and the ability to track and provide proof. That's a big one. So CASL, the burden of proof is on the sender. So if somebody comes and complains about you, and then it's your job to prove to the CRTC that you had compliance. So if you haven't been tracking things and you don't know where your emails came from, you don't have anything physical or verbal, you don't have a recording, you don't have a piece of paper, you don't have a server log or an IP address, you don't have proof, and you will be fined for non-compliance. Determine the levels of risk your organization is willing to accept, similar to what I was saying. Find a lawyer that can learn your business. Even then, you have to determine for yourself what you think is reasonable as far as risk is concerned. You may have a group of email records on your database that you're sure mentally you're sure you know where they came from, but you don't quite know if you have proof or not. Assess that risk. Is it really important to keep them on file, or should I just knock them off and not take that risk? Create a CASL implementation plan. And then produce CASL requirement specs for your implementation. Don't just create a plan and then leave it to everybody else. That champion or that CASL person has got to see it all the way through and actually put the specs together and make sure that they're within compliance, or else you're going to do all of this for nothing. Treat your CASL consent acquisition like a campaign. Basically what this means is if you're seeking express consent, which is the best kind of consent that you can get, because it's saying, yeah, I'll take anything you want to send to me, commercially or otherwise, and I'll never have an expiry date. So until I say stop, you can continue. So we are, all wanting to have 100% express consent if we could, but it's a dream that I don't think many of us are going to achieve. But treat it like a campaign, like you would a renewal campaign, a verification campaign, a requalification campaign, or any other campaign that you might have out in the marketplace. So have an existing process to go out and seek express consent from people while you still have your implied consent. Include telemarketing in that acquisition. It doesn't mean you should get express consent just by email. It doesn't mean express consent just comes in through the web. You can go to trade shows to get express consent. You can go to telemarketing and get express consent. If you wanted to, you could fax blast people and ask them for their express consent on their email. But always, always, always keep a record, keep track, and keep that proof of that express consent forever, because the express consent lasts forever. So you can never go back to your archives and say, throw away these 6 boxes that are marked express consent from, in 1902. We only keep them at all times. And always ask for consent on everything that you can do where it makes sense to do so. So collect your consent as much as you can. My 5 keys to CASL success. First one I'd already mentioned, that's to appoint a CASL professional, or professionals, depending on your needs. Choose at least 1 or 2 individuals who are going to champion CASL and understand and know the requirements and be the lead on anything compliance related. Extremely important that if you're going to put these people into that position, that you give them the authority and the opportunity to be able to do the job. There's no sense in going to some staff member and saying, hey, you're going to be our CASL compliance officer, and when they come to you and say, oh, well, you know what, we really need to make sure that we're not handing our emails to our salespeople anymore, and you say, no, that's ridiculous, you know, we're going to continue business as always. What's the point in that? You have to make sure that the CASL person, whether you want to call them a compliance officer, a CASL champion, or anything like that, make sure that they have the authority from management to be able to get that job done, and reasonably well. Get and track consent, obviously. Yes.
Sorry, I have a question on that.
Yes.
What are the pitfalls of that? What are the obstacles? I mean, if you say, you know, have you had concerns with management and support when there's a $10 million?
Yeah. The $10 million is to the corporation. The individual is not going to be liable unless they're a director roller-up. But the virtue of making them the compliance officer, you would think that you've elevated their title to be responsible for CASL. But technically, the legislation says they have to be a director or up. So you can be a manager of a department and a CASL compliance officer. And you technically cannot incur that $1 million charge yourself. Now, if you cost your company $10 million because you did it wrong, well, I don't think you're going to keep your job very long. But you know, you won't be up S Creek, at least personally. So there are ramifications to that. You'll have to have someone in the organization that's willing to take on that responsibility. And you know, you shouldn't do it just to throw the title at someone for the sake of doing it. It should be serious, a serious consideration with the anticipation of getting compliance in place. You're welcome. So always track everything. Use every opportunity you get to get consent. So in the B2B world, we have the ability to get consent under some exemptions under the CASL legislation. And some of those exemptions are if you have existing business relationship with a person, so they're a subscriber, they're an advertiser, they're, you know, an affiliate that we do business with because they're a supplier to us. Or if they provided their email address directly to you, so they filled in a form and they gave me their email address. Or if they are conspicuously published in the public domain. And that means that anybody can find that email online at all times. It doesn't mean that you go into your LinkedIn account and people who are linked in with you, you can just take their emails and add them to your products, brands. That's not implied consent. It's got to be on an open forum, not a closed circuit. So at the end of the day, when you're getting that consent from people, keep a file of it, track it, ask your salespeople to hand you their business cards. At our place, if a salesperson comes up to us and just says, hey, add Jim Smith that they've written on a piece of paper onto the newsletter, and newsletter is considered a commercial electronic message, CASL requirements, we say, no, we can't do that. Where's the consent? So we will actually force our salespeople who say, but it's, you know, it's someone who wants to be a client, I want them to see the newsletter. We'll say, have them send you an email, not you send them one, but have them send you an email saying, I would like to receive your newsletter, could you please send it to me? We file that, that's our proof of consent at that point. It's implied consent because they're just asking for the newsletter, it's not express consent, but we have 2 years to continue sending that newsletter. And if they renew the newsletter or renew a subscription, that clock starts again with that implied consent, so we roll it over. Send the express consent while you still have the implied consent. I think I mentioned that before. As soon as your implied consent is done, you cannot email those people. And they made it very clear because a lot of people were sending emails to people they had no consent for, asking them to get consent, which was a complete breach of the legislation. But people just didn't recognize it. They just thought, oh, I've got the email address, I'm going to email them and ask them if they'll give me their consent. Well, but if you don't have consent, you know, and be careful when you're asking for express consent. There is no requirement to have a no box on that express consent. So if you're going to go out and you're going to say to your readership, I want you to give me express consent. And on the form it says, yes, I give express consent, or no, I don't give express consent. And especially if you make it required that they have to fill one or the other. When people say, no, I don't give express consent, you've lost your implied consent if you happen to have it on there as well. And now you can still email them because legally you have implied consent to do that. But your reader has just said no, and now they're getting stuff from you. There's no requirement for that no box. All you have to ensure when you're getting express consent is that the yes box is not pre-checked and that they have to take an actual action to check that box and submit that express consent. Constantly audit and document everything. We at our organization have an approval process in place. Every email that is deployed, and we deploy a lot. I think our organization goes through about 60 million emails a year. So we do take CASL very seriously as a result of this, and that includes our newsletters and our renewals and everything else too. But every single email that goes out the door is approved by at least 3 people. And one is, if it's newsletters, the editor. If it's a sales piece, it's the salesperson. But it's always a person that checks the content and makes sure that the content is relevant to the individual. And there's always a circulation person that checks that unsubscribe link and makes sure that it works before it goes out the door. And after that, we also make sure we're seated in the actual sense. So you get the proof before it goes out the door, you check everything, make sure there's nothing outside of compliance. Everything's fine, everybody's approved, it goes out the door, and then you get the live job so that you can check that again and make sure nothing went wrong. So it's a taxing process, but it ensures that we don't make a silly mistake somewhere along the line. We'll catch it before we hit the send button. Mistakes happen, human error happens. And when that does happen, the key is to log it appropriately. Have that, logging or complaint sort of protocol in place so that you can say, yeah, the guy hit the button, he wasn't supposed to hit the button, this wasn't approved yet, the link doesn't work, or whatever the situation might be. You log it officially as a CASL breach, and you also log the action that you took to fix it. So you've either reprimanded that employee, or you have put something else in place which will not allow that email blast to go out without that third approval. Something to say that you've done your best due diligence to make sure it doesn't happen again. Even when you get everything in line and everything seems to be working right, do mini audits. Just like you check your circulation data to make sure that everything is still on track. Do the same thing with CASL. Make sure that you're looking at your expiries for your implied consent, so you're not going to be too surprised when half of your list falls off one day because it reached an expiry date. Make sure that you have the proper policies and the documentation. Make sure that you have basically the binder. It doesn't have to be a physical binder. Mine is an electronic folder, but you have all of the requirements to say that this is our procedure for emails. This is who can get their hands on the emails. This is our change process. This is the type of people that can and can't access emails from the database. And just have all of that in, so if you ever get called into question by the CRTC, you can say you've done your homework, you've put policies together, you've educated staff, you've done everything you can to make sure everybody's aware of the compliance requirements, and that you have done what you can to ensure that you are as compliant as possible. And if you did do an oopsie, they're likely not going to do much more than give you a warning, hopefully, if that's the case. The last two, is your design templates. So when you're doing the design of all your email pieces, it helps eliminate a lot of human error if there's a template available to the people that are putting that HTML together to do that deployment, whether it's a newsletter or a third-party blast or anything that you're working on. If you know that every time they pull a job up, it starts with a template, and that template always have the unsubscribed links on the bottom. They always have the identification information of who you are, who the sender is. They also have your privacy policy. If you have a CASL policy, which I do advise everybody has, that out-facing CASL policy, make sure all the links are there to the contact us and everything else that needs to be there. If there's a template in place, make sure the headers are there, make sure everything's working right. You won't get any surprises after the fact. And the biggest and most important thing, not just in CASL, but in everything that we do, is honor your readers' requests. So minimize all possible risk of your irritated recipients. Give them a simple, easy, fast way to tell you what they want. If you have a number of products, you're best off to have a preference center. The preference center is going to allow them to see everything that you're sending to them and gives them the opportunity to say, remove me from everything, or remove me just from all third parties, or remove me from all your newsletters. Or, no, just remove you from this one specific newsletter that I don't care to get. Send me everything else that I'm getting. But if you manage all of this properly and you manage it to all the levels that you can, you're best off. And if you're doing all of this, at the end of the day, you're going to have happy readers, you'll have a happy database, and you'll be much happier as a result. And that was it. Any questions? Anything else? Yes.
I just had a quick comment. You mentioned Statistics Canada, and I'm actually from Statistics Canada.
Okay.
So if anyone has any questions on how to use our CASL database,
Great.
I'd be more than happy to help, because I know it can be sometimes difficult to navigate around.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If anyone has any questions for the rest of this
No.
conference, feel free to
That's great. And actually, I'll have a question for you because do you guys still do the farming and agriculture data?
I'm not
In
in
that
that
part?
division, but if you go on CASL, you can see
Yeah.
all their surveys that we release.
Okay.
I'm actually on periodical publishing.
I got you. Okay.
So that's my
Okay.
survey, yeah.
Great. Okay. So there you go. And you can discuss CAN data. Okay. So no one gouged their eyes out. So that's a good thing. Yes.
It's about CASL.
Yeah.
If I go to a trade show, let's say in January of this year,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
if I go to a trade show, or my sales guy goes to a trade show, in January, he gets 1,000 business cards, which is really great.
Yeah.
Now, I key it into a spreadsheet,
Mhm.
obviously, and then I upload it to these individuals to receive the newsletter.
Right.
Is the date from the day that I received the newsletter, the business card,
It should,
or is it the date that the individual
it should be
receives
individual.
the first newsletter
No.
that
It's when that salesperson
receives the
received
business
those business
cards?
cards. So if he was on the trade show on January 11th, your start date for expiry of your implied consent should be January 11th.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what about a directory? Let's say there's a directory that's publicly domained. or
Okay, it's on the
publicly-
website, okay?
It's a directory I can pay $20 for and I get the directory.
If you pay $20, it's not public domain.
We got it free,
Okay.
but there's a price for it, let's say.
Public, no, that can't be. Public domain is anybody can access that data. There's no sign-in requirements, there's no firewall, there's no anything.
But what's a physical directory?
If it's a physical directory
Yes.
and it's in the marketplace,
Yes, they're selling
you
it, let's
could,
say.
but you'd have to use the date of the publish of the directory as your consent.
But what about if it takes you a year to key it into a spreadsheet
You
because
still
they're
have to use-
slow?
you still have to use that date. That's the published date.
Because there's thousands of different
It's
things.
the date of consent or perceived
The consent, the
Okay.
consent from an implied consent, conspicuous
Right.
published is the consent, the date that you were provided that information. So on a website, I go on there
It's
today,
date, stamp.
it's today because I was provided that
Even though
today.
it takes you 2 months to key
To
into
key
a
it, doesn't matter,
spreadsheet.
I got it
Okay.
2 months ago.
Screenshot it, so you
Yes.
have that date when you
Exactly.
screenshot it.
Yes.
Exactly,
And then
yeah,
that's when the
Yeah.
6 months
Yeah.
expires after that.
yeah, yeah. So it'd be the date of acquisition of the email in that case.
I didn't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Go
that.
talk to the CRTC in a couple of weeks,
It
yeah.
does take you a while to key that
Yeah,
information.
because you can't scrape it, you can't use a
Well, it's
harvesting
a
tool.
business
so-
card, and the salesperson brings thousands to you.
Yeah. Man, that's a good salesperson though.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
it's great. Yeah, I'm happy when they bring me 3, you know? Okay,
It's a new common employee. Sales rep.
all right, well, thank you, everybody, thanks for sticking it out, and
Thank you.
I think drinks will be served so we can get all of everything.